Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Steph Zone channel. So, my original plan for this video was to go deep into autumn and winter inspiration and plans. This is normally a super inspiring season for me. There's that combination of the crisp weather, the soft autumn colors in England, and the fact that the weather here makes being inside crafting feel very appealing most of the time. However, I have to be honest, that's not actually how I feel this year. The reality is, I've had a shitty year. There's no other way to say it. I'm still excited to create this season and I'm getting involved with some makes, but it's required active effort for me to stay inspired and engaged. I'm pretty stressed, I'm homesick. The political landscape stresses me out in the US and the UK every day. Also, randomly, I got extremely sick for the first time in my life this year. Here's me in my first ever ambulance ride. So, life did have me against the ropes, but I had a positive attitude about it. So rather than pretend that my life is just much calmer and more aesthetic than it actually is, today we're going to talk about finding inspiration in real life, even when you're feeling like your real life isn't very beautiful. I've managed to pull my creative energy back from the brink this year, and I've planned some projects and actually made good headway on many of them. And my techniques don't involve scrolling Pinterest or endless time on Instagram. Instead, I'll be showing you how I find inspiration from wherever I am and whatever is around me, and why that's left me feeling so much more inspired than something served up by an algorithm. Let's get into it. Let's start with a question. Beyond the obvious consideration of weather, how much does where you live or where you spend time actually influence how you sew and how you knit? I'd guess for most of us, the answer is probably not that much. Unless you're going out of your way to find specialist shops, most of us can't access crafting materials created locally, if those even exist at all. Similarly, I think online influences usually ends up homogenized around global fast fashion brands anyway. To be clear, I don't think that having access to global supplies or global influences is in any way a bad thing. I've helped many companies that are based all over the world. However, I do want to encourage you to consider letting your location inspire a project or two this autumn, and not just as an effort to support local businesses, which is of course very important. Really though, it's more about a way to drive positive connections with where you are at a time when you might not actually be feeling like that. Let's explore 2 different ways that we can do this. Firstly, and most obviously, is finding fabrics, trims, yarns, whatever, other supplies that come from areas around you. For example, at the end of the summer, Josh and I spent a wonderful couple of days in St. David's in Wales, which is actually the smallest city in the UK. Some of you spotted some Pembrokeshire b-roll in my recent video, so congrats to those of you who knew what it was. I was really moved by the natural beauty of Wales. People told me that I was going to feel like that, but it was definitely true. As part of our trip, we visited a number of wool mills, and my very patient fiance also drove me to 5 different yarn shops before we actually were able to find a local wool. I picked up a load of really hyper-local yarn from Quay Street Yarns in Haverfordwest. As an aside, the owner of that shop, Claire, started that shop in 2024 when she was 74 years old. I just really loved this story. Now, because this yarn is so rustic, and I think it's fair enough, these sheep have it tough living outside, I knew I wanted to make a really woolly piece of outerwear this year. I have settled on the drift jacket from Rose Knitwear. This is her book knit. The drift jacket is right here on the cover. And it's knit on very chunky, 7 to 8 millimeter needles, and I'm holding the yarn that I got double. It's like a DK weight, I think. I will say this book definitely deserves its popularity. There's so many fun designs in here. It's so fun to look through. I'm already on the second sleeve of the jacket, and then we'll just have to sew it together and add the collar, but I'm loving the experience so far. This is my first time knitting cables, but I found it to be really relaxing, and I just love the tactile element of working with such a rustic, warm yarn. Similarly, Josh and I attended a wedding in Shrewsbury a couple weeks ago. Shrewsbury itself is just a gorgeous place to be in autumn. Think lots of medieval streets, antique shops, and pubs. The food and drink scene there is really top-notch. I felt like it punched above its weight. Of course, we still had to do a yarn shop stop, and this time we went to Ewe Ply. Ewe Ply is focused entirely on high-quality natural fiber yarns, and the selection of the yarns in store is stunning. They even carried traditional 5-ply Guernsey wool, which I've never seen in person but is used to create those traditional fisherman sweaters. However, I wanted to go to Ewe Ply specifically for their own yarn brand, ShrOHwsbury. This is actually made from the owner's flock along with other local suppliers, so all the fiber is coming from within 20 miles of them. I think that's amazing. I got 3 small DK skeins in this rich dark blue with whitest contrast, and I think I'm going to be making some colorwork mittens this year, since I've never done stranded colorwork before, although I have said that in prior years and didn't do it, so we'll see. I'm going to do it though this year. This year's different. Of course, buying local tends to be a bit easier for knitters than it is for sewists. There are absolutely places that are still maintaining local textile production, like Yorkshire, the wool mills up there in the UK, but I know it's few and far between in the US and the UK as well. So rather than give a goal that I know most of you can't really achieve, I want to encourage you to think about local connection in a broader way. For example, I live near Southwark in London, and before anyone gets worried, I'm not doxing myself. You can tell that from my Instagram, and also Southwark is 300,000 people. In really recent history, this was an industrial area, and you can really see the remnants of those former warehouses behind all those bars and fancy apartments in Shad Thames. If I still wanted to make something inspired by this area, I could potentially look up old images of workers in old uniforms and use that to upgrade a chore coat or a boiler suit pattern. However, you can definitely get inspired by a place without knowing the history of the area or needing to look anything up. We don't always need to be so academic. I am originally from Allentown, Pennsylvania. It's in the US, of course. It's a smaller Rust Belt town. Really interesting place from a history and demographic perspective. Also, it's in an unflattering Billy Joel song. But I'm really thinking about something much simpler that I loved about my hometown. Allentown is home to the PP&L building, formerly Pennsylvania Power and Light, which is the main electric company of the area. Every year around the holidays, the buildings light up with a Christmas tree on one side and a candle on the other. As a kid, this was a core memory of the holiday season kicking off. On my list this season is to sew something Christmassy, which actually I've never done. And as I was considering ideas, my mind immediately went to those lights. My goal is to make something probably like a sweatshirt, featuring those same two motifs, the Christmas tree and the candle, although I grew up on the candle side, so I think I'm going to do the candle. Like the PP&L lights, I want the design to be made up of rectangles because they do it with the windows, and I think that I could do it through a combination of patchwork, machine embroidery, maybe some iron transfer as well. I also have a really great piece of just a really stable cream sweatshirt, and I'm not going to show it because it's boring to look at, but I know that that would be nice to embroider on. It wouldn't shift a lot or stretch. Whether you're into buying local supplies or just referencing some local favorites, letting place inspire your making creates this lovely sense of nostalgia for me. Every time I wear the drift jacket or hopefully those eventual mittens, I'm going to remember meandering back to a hotel, laughing, maybe slightly drunk, on the streets of those medieval towns with Josh. Every time I imagine the Christmas lights on the PP&L building, I'm transported to being a kid, noticing them on the drive back home from visiting relatives over the holidays and just realizing we were almost home. Even if nobody else really understands those references, they matter to me, and they're going to make my closet feel meaningful in a way that a general fashion trend just could really never replicate. Now, let's say that we have the energy to be out and about a bit, but we're not trying to think too hard. We can move to our next source of inspiration, and it wouldn't really be right to talk about autumn sewing inspiration without mentioning color. When we think of autumn, at least in the parts of the world that I've lived in, I think we all consider rich, intense oranges, the reds and falling leaves, maybe soft gray and cloudy skies. However, before you go dredge up an autumn color palette from social media, I'm going to encourage you to actually go outside. Go walk around your neighborhood, nearby park, office building, doesn't matter. What matters is that you really look at what's around you and take in how it seems. This can be surprisingly hard to do in places that you're really familiar with, but just put in the effort to pay attention for a bit, even if it's only for 5 minutes. Then start to notice what draws your eye. What colors and patterns make you stop and take notice, or maybe make you feel relaxed? How does your area actually look at this time of year? These little nature walks, although often not nature walks, maybe we'll call them a notice walk because, most of the time I'm in a city. They're really my go-to when I kind of don't feel great, but I still have the energy to go out. Over the last couple months, 2 things from those walks have really started to influence what I'm making. The first one, bluntly, is just the color orange. It wasn't just any orange, it's an intense, almost glowing bright orange. It doesn't necessarily strike you immediately as an autumn shade, but it turns out that color pops up a surprising amount around here. There's a couple things I want to do with this. First, I want an orange sweater, which I've never attempted before just because I didn't want it to look like it was Halloween specific. However, I think a neon orange is the way to go, and WoolyKnit happened to have the perfect shade in their British wool. My plan is to make a cable sweater with it. I think it's going to be really fun to have a traditional knit in a pretty unexpected color. I haven't decided yet on pattern, but I'm definitely leaning towards something by Quay. She's also a YouTuber in addition to being a wonderful knitwear designer. I'm leaning towards her Lauder sweater, and then actually when I was looking at the photos to do this video, I realized she'd knit up the cardigan version of that in a similar bright red or bright orangish color, so it really feels like fate. Slightly less obnoxiously orange, but still pretty orange. I actually have a finished autumn make to show you, and it is another bag. This little beauty comes from a Babylon leather kit, which they've kindly gifted me. I've worked with Babylon leather before, as do several other sewing and knitting YouTubers, but in case you don't know the deal, these kits come with all the pieces you need to make the bag, and critically, with the holes pre-punched into the leather for sewing. You get to do the relaxing hand sewing part, accompanied with a video tutorial. And I will say the tutorial is subtitled, so you don't have to watch this with the volume on. So it really is the perfect companion for relaxed crafting. I made this bag during a Lord of the Rings marathon, and it took me the Fellowship of the Ring and a good portion of the Two Towers, so I'll say maybe 5 or 6 hours total, working at a very leisurely pace. I'm really pleased with the end result, and just like my other make from a Babylon kit, the finished bag is really sturdy. Material-wise, this is a leather outer with a synthetic lining. It's a great option for a Christmas gift, either the kit itself or the finished bag, and you can use code STEPH10 to get 10% off. The reason that I wanted to point this out now rather than waiting to put it in a makes roundup, which I'm going to do in a couple weeks anyway, is because they are doing a Black Friday sale. So it's going to be 30% off for Black Friday from November 21st through December 5th. I've checked with them and my code will stack in addition to the Black Friday discount. So it just is a good time if you're considering something like that. I felt like it'd be a bit annoying for me to wait and then tell you that you could have gotten a discount like 2 weeks before. Back to our inspiration, the other thing that surprised me is how much I've started to notice the brickwork in my local area. I'll be honest, I've always leaned towards very organic patterns, florals, abstract swirls, watercolors, things like that. But I will say, dating an architect has allowed me to learn about bricks I was pretty often against my will, and I've started to realize that there is a lot of beautiful masonry around me that, to be honest, I've never ever paid attention to. It's made me want to give more geometric patterns a try, and I have 2 options to show you. These are both Indian cottons. They're from Sanskruti. I've talked about that shop very often, but I have a whole video spotlight on them. The first is this hand-woven cotton with a red and mustard chevron pattern. I'm planning some sort of like bustier top, princess seam crop top in this. I know it needs to be a lined garment given the fact that the back has those loose threads, and I think I could do some really cool alternating of the stripe direction. For my second fabric though, I'm a little bit less sure. The scale of these diamonds is quite large, so I need to think of how to best use this print. I'm in love with the colors though, I really want to use it soon, so if you have any ideas, definitely let me know. There have been some real benefits from this approach of just tracking what draws my eye and letting that guide me in what I want to make next. For one, I can finally take a walk around the city without like podcast or music to drown out my thoughts. This is a big win for me. I'm like pretty high strung. And more than that, just paying closer attention has added these little moments of delight into my day. I see a vivid leaf on the pavement and take a picture. I'm recording patterns of bricks I've walked past a million times and seeing colors I didn't really realize I loved until I started seeing them everywhere. None of it's profound, but it really has genuinely shifted how I think about making. Instead of reaching for inspiration out there in the ether, I'm just responding to what's actually right in front of me. It's little switches like this that are making my wardrobe feel more inspired by my own life and just are putting me back in touch with my own tastes. Let's say that life really has you against the ropes and even a gentle meander through your neighborhood is just not available to you right now. Firstly, take care of yourself. But if your hands are getting restless, there are still ways to get creatively inspired without immediately reaching for your phone. What I've realized is that when I can't find inspiration in trends or places or even plans, I can always find it in people. The people who taught me how to make things, or the people whose care, effort, and creativity just really quietly shaped the life that I live now. Looking around my home, especially at those pieces that remind me of the people I love, really sparks ideas that I feel like I'm carrying their stories forward, or like I'm the next stitch in a bigger piece of work. Now, sometimes this happens for me without thinking. I've made dresses from vintage patterns and then learned that years ago my mom made the same pattern when she was my age. The gray cable knit jacket that I showed you reminds me of a similar cardigan that my grandmother made with irregular cables. However, I have a much more deliberate example to show you here. Let me get them. So these patchwork velvet pillows that I have in my hand are actually quite old. We have a couple of them. Here's the green one here. And here's a red one. And these are really special to us because they come from Josh's grandmother's house. She is sadly no longer with us, but when I tell you that this woman was a jack of all trades, she ran a pet shop for decades, she sewed, she knit, she gardened, she had an orchard, like greenhouses. This is a woman who was gardening with a chainsaw into her 90s. I only got to meet her a handful of times, but I just have so much respect and admiration for her. Anyway, when I had my health troubles over the summer and into the autumn, there was a long period of time where I just had to sit on the couch most evenings and weekends. Cutting stuff out and sewing was definitely too much for me, and I didn't even really have the energy and mental focus to like cast on a meaningful or big knitting project. But after a week, I was like really getting restless, and I noticed the pillows that were sitting next to me. They've been next to me the whole time, and I'm sitting on the couch with them every day. As I was looking at them, I realized that even if bigger projects weren't an option, I could do something small, and I wanted to connect with Josh's grandmother's work, even if it was in a really small way. Since Josh's grandmother just made casually beautiful homewares, I decided to copy her. The Rose Knitwear book that I showed you earlier also has a pattern for tea towels here, the Annie cloth set. Let me see if I can get close enough. So you can see they're very simple color work, just some slip stitches, and they're the perfect knit for sitting in front of the TV in a stupor. Here is where I've gotten to so far. So the first towel is done. I just need to weave in some ends. And the second one is a washcloth, which just needs its border. For yarn, I've used dropped saffron, but I've tried to use the same color palette as Josh's grandma. It's very 70s, just a slightly fresher take. Now, as someone who usually works on, I would say, more intermediate and advanced sewing and knitting projects, it feels a little bit strange to end the video talking about a tea towel, but that's kind of the beauty of it. Waiting until conditions are right for a big project is a really wonderful way to end up making nothing at all. Rather than pressuring yourself to make things that are advanced or to be really productive, what matters more is just staying connected to the act of making and to the people whose creativity shaped the world around you or even taught you how to be creative. Funny enough, I was talking to Josh about the fact that I was going to put his grandmother's pillows in this video, and he was like, well, that's really nice, but we're actually not sure that she was the one who made them. They came from her house. It was either her or it was my aunt. And I actually find that to be really moving, and I think it really says something about how natural and consistent making was for them. The fact that the whole family contributed to making their home beautiful, and they weren't worried about who made the most impressive thing. My little tea towels, I'd like to think, are just a tiny continuation of that thread, and that thought alone was enough to give me a bit of creative spark back at a time when I really, really needed it. I hope that you enjoyed that video and found it useful. There is so much creative inspiration to be found in your real life, and by actively seeking it out instead of passively absorbing algorithm content, you can jumpstart your creativity in a way that is really unique to you, unique to your context. Perhaps more importantly, there is beautiful, inspiring stuff around you, and you might not be noticing it. We're all getting a little bit too used to seeing unrealistic but very aesthetic images. To be clear again, I'm not saying that I don't look for inspiration online. My last video was about exactly that. But it's actually not the first place I go, and it's certainly not the thing that I prioritize when I'm feeling low. You're using your makes in real life, so why not let your real life be the inspiration? But now, as always, I want to hear from you. Have you used any of the strategies that I've talked about before for finding inspiration? If you've made a project inspired by a place or inspired by a person, I would really love to know. Or if you have other strategies for how to find creative inspiration in real life, please share them. I think it's something that we're all really interested in. If you do want to hear more from me, you can of course subscribe, but you can also follow me over on Instagram. I'm at the same handle, just StephZone. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!